On Thursday night, Dave Chappelle released a new special, 846, on Netflix's YouTube channel. Filmed in front of a socially distanced audience, it was an emotional response to the murder of George Floyd. He talks about, among other things, the insidious spirit of Candace Owens, the brutality of policing in general, and the leadership and bravery of the protesters. So what did we think?
Well, I will just say this. The past few years, being a young black woman who was a fan of Dave Chappelle have been miserable, have been so difficult. I've had to redefine everything I know. I love Dave Chappelle. I really have always valued what he says, and I've always found him very funny. But this video essay, stand-up set sort of situation didn't touch on everything that I would have liked it to touch on. But for what it did operate as, I'm very happy and satisfied with some of the things that he said. But otherwise, I still have many critiques. He doesn't mention trans people. He only mentions trans people when he uses them for butts of jokes. He doesn't mention women in this, as if he doesn't have a daughter and a wife. He doesn't have a whole black daughter. So there are definitely a lot of issues with it, but I was very impressed by his ability to connect every single aspect of his own life and somehow make that resemble what it means to be a black man.
I think also something I liked about this that I wouldn't say I would like in almost any other context is he has an open notebook, and it sort of seems like it's a trick, really, that he's piecing it all together, that in a way it's coming to him, phrase by phrase, and then suddenly you'll realize there's a hard segue coming into, horrible information about George Floyd, and it's been brilliantly plotted. And I think there's not just a suspense in figuring out where he's going, but also something authentic about just wrapping your head around this whole situation. Like it put a voice to the kind of the way we actually feel inarticulate, even though he is being very articulate in the special.
What's interesting too is the comparisons that it got between Nanette and this, which I don't think that they're similar at all. And I think that people are just, there's no hard jokes in it, so must be Nanette.
You know what? But Dave, I think it's like these new innovative ways of talking about stand-up. Like you look at Drew Michael's special on HBO where he doesn't have an audience, and Nanette, who was lauded and awarded for the beauty of the change in that style. But Dave Chappelle might get a little webby for this. He really might. But people are going to need to understand that it is a new way of speaking and telling jokes.
I am thankful in a strange way. Maybe this will catch on, but the idea of just putting out a basic half hour of comedy that you shot like on Netflix, if you have that capability, like a week later, there's something about getting a comedy special like 3.5 months after it's shot where it's just not nearly as exciting
Slightly
anymore.
off,
Yeah. So like the kind of here's a word we use a lot on this show, stunt of it, I think actually is kind of a cool technique.
There's constantly this cognitive dissonance, This one doesn't mention trans people, but we still had Netflix giving him money to denigrate trans people. Before, and that still exists there, and it's something that he would trot out as the butt of jokes or mention I have a trans friend, and it's there's a thing of utility, I think you could say, of so many of the other people who aren't cis straight black men in Dave Chappelle's life about they're only useful to him either for a joke or to back up a joke. And especially in this moment where we need to remind people that Black trans lives matter. I could definitely see why people are they don't want to fuck with this special. But it also becomes a unimpeachable thing because it is about George Floyd and police brutality, right?
Yeah. It still has its points. Points were made, girl.
Yes, it still has its points, but you have to remember that James Baldwin quote, we must fight for your life as though it were our own, because if they come take you in the morning, they come for us at night. And it's he just doesn't seem to have any sort of regard, I guess, for LGBTQ plus people, because there's no mention of trans people, but there was a mention of Don Lemon. And what I'm really interested in is the fact that this mention of Don Lemon was cut from the special. So when it first went to YouTube,
that's where I saw it, and that was there.
yeah. So when it first went to YouTube, there was closed captioning on it, and early viewers of it found a riff on Don Lemon that is not reflected in the dialogue that you're hearing.
Yeah.
So this Don Lemon joke was clearly cut, but the closed captioning still had it. And then closed captioning was disabled.
Wow.
And then it went back, and now it's gone. There are clips of it online, and it was reported by Craig Jenkins and Vulture. But basically what he said was, he starts talking about Don Lemon, asking, where are the celebrities talking about this? And I will agree that I think it's dumb to constantly be like, where are the celebrities and talking about this Black Lives Matter? It's just like, someone's going to be like, what does Matthew Settle, what does Kelly Rutherford think of Black Lives Matter? I'm like, shut the fuck up. But he talks about Don Lemon and says, Don Lemon is a funny newscaster because he's clearly gay, but he's the anomaly. He's black and gay, but unlike my other black and gay friends, he's got this weird self-righteousness. And then he prepares to do an impression of him.
I didn't see this. This wasn't on YouTube.
It was only in the closed captioning initially. Wow. That clip is never there. But it reminds me too that we're not useful for him, and we're not. He doesn't see queer black men as a thing, And I think the self-righteousness thing is him equating Don Lemon's self-righteousness, his uppityness, to his gayness, which is a connection to whiteness for him. And for so many, like, cis black men who, like, try to exclude, like, black women and trans women and black men, black queer men from, like, the Black Lives Matter movement writ large, And I would say that, of course, your black gay friend probably don't have this weird self-righteousness around you because, one, if they're in that space that you're in, they're probably of a status that allows them to be in that space, and they're not rocking the boat with you the same way he's not rocking the boat when it comes to economic disparity and shit, because he's rich now, and he's brought that up before, and so it just shows that it's more of the same, to be honest. And I would say that the only thing that interests me about it is I want to know who cut it. Because I assume, like, he has Final Cut, et cetera. It's going to say whatever he wants to say. So I'm like, did Netflix cut it? Or did Dave Chappelle actually, in retrospect, sort of realize, oh, this message that I actually need to say about George Floyd, like, don't fuck it up by, like, me saying some stupid shit about Don Lemon being gay and self-righteous.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Dave Chappelle. I think he's smart enough to understand that and that it was clouding up his message. But I also think you're right that it's so fucked up to insinuate that black gay men are performing a type of whiteness or this, exactly what you're getting at, Ira, when queer people have no choice but to self-monitor and change their behavior to minimize aggression. And I don't think that he should be speaking on that at all. Another thing that I found to be interesting was, like, as I was saying earlier, how he does not mention black women. He does. He mentions black women twice. He mentions Candace Owens, a woman who we all dislike. I understand that. But he goes in, he harps on her. He calls her a bitch. He says all these things. I laughed. But I did clock the fact that that's the only time he talked about a black woman so far. And then the next time he talks about a black woman is to reaffirm the rumors that were going around after Azealia Banks dropped a video talking about how she fucked Dave Chappelle. So you're telling me the only two times this nigga brought up black women was to be like, I hate them and I fuck them? Like, what? Why not pay attention to what you are also not saying? That is what I want from Dave Chappelle. Pay attention to what you're saying. There's the usefulness thing again. Exactly.
The usefulness thing again, right? Like, the reason black cis men don't at least will regard, like, a black woman is, like, because they're useful to fuck, you know? And he even seemed more disappointed in Candace Owens than he was, like, upset with her, you know, like it's like
Yeah.
it's like he had more hate and disrespect for Don Lemon than he did Candace Owens. Her, he's just like, she's smart, but she's dumb. Why don't she know better?
I also think if he's going to talk about Don Lemon being self-righteous, like cite examples, like that's just not what I would think of when I think of Don Lemon. I found that more confusing than anything. Is it that he's a newscaster and then eventually and sort of has a monologue from time to time? Like I want that defined. You know,
I wouldn't classify Don Lemon as self-righteous, but I would say that there is a conversation to be had. I feel like Kamala Harris. I would like to have that conversation. You know, I really would like to have that conversation.
Start dancing for me.
Because I think literally one of our first episodes of Keep It, Lewis, we talked about Don Lemon's sort of like woke moment where he was talking about
his
Trump.
swerve.
You know,
His swerve.
But previous Don Lemon is a fucking clown. You know, and
right? There is a before and after.
We haven't really reconciled, and I don't think anyone's really interviewed him or talked to him yet about the fact that like he was a clown who trafficked in respectability politics, who said stupid shit about like black people needing to like pull up their pants, like had wild ass comparisons of himself to like James Baldwin, and was sort of playing for the whites then, to be honest.
Yep.
And then switched over. And I really do want to know, like, who is checking Don Lemon in real life and was like, you know what, nigga, maybe you need to read a book. But I would classify that now is not self-righteous. Now it's him, you know, actually trying to do the work. That's what I have to say about Don Lemon.
You know, I'm really starting to kind of analyze what Dave Chappelle's purpose is supposed to be for society, and I really think he is for the black men. He is to teach black men and to get them to fucking understand. At first, I was like, why wouldn't you mention black women? But then I realized the responsibility, and also the responsibility of men to put women in situations where they can speak about that stuff. That responsibility is on a Wanda Sykes or a Monique or someone who is equipped to talk about black women. I mean, I'm not saying that they have to do that and that I expect them to, but if that were to happen, I feel like I should be putting my hopes with them.
But do we want him as a black man teacher? Because, I mean, like, at this point, if you're a black man teacher who can't teach that all of us matter, that we're all in this shit, like, leave the classroom.
You're teaching the wrong
thing. You know?
Yeah.
You know, because if you're still going to denigrate trans people or women or anything else, it's like, what the fuck use are you? Especially now when our people are dying, you know? Like, it's not just black men that's dying, you know? Like, it's fucking Breonna Taylor. It's Toyin. You know? It's bullshit.
You're right. No, you're right. It's all bullshit. And even the lack of mention of Tony McDade and Breonna Taylor, people who died before George Floyd. Excuse me. At least Tony McDade did. So there's a lot of things that, you know, again, with the purpose of Dave Chappelle and what he is, the way he still managed to, you know, use the time that the cop left his knee on George Floyd's neck, that was his birth time, and how Kobe's numbers were his birthday, 8/24, and how his grandfather was also a slave. This ability to say, look, people who are getting killed look like me. Don't you like me? Don't you care about my life? I think the beauty of how he wrote that special and the artistry of it, I'm still in shock of Dave Chappelle and how he writes. But you're very valid. Everything you're saying is valid. That I don't want him to teach.
But even that, I mean, the more I'm talking about it, the more I'm just pissed off, right? I mean, because I liked it in the moment, but I liked it in the moment, and like, you know, it's talking about that history connecting to the grandfather, like the slave, you know, whatever. It's like we just talked to Drew Dixon, and we just watched On the Record, and that ties a line from slavery and white supremacy to the subjugation of black women within the community, you know? And it's like, that's the full fucking through line. And Dave Chappelle, it's like he got a textbook and the last third of it was cut out. Maybe he fell asleep. Maybe he fell asleep in that class. I don't know.
Yeah.
And
No, you're right. Actually, now that we're talking about it more, the more I'm realizing I thought maybe he was teaching black men, but those aren't the lessons I want black men to be taught. I need this
it's
to
not.
Be
they need better.
Yeah.
They need better teachers. They need better teachers. Period. Read black women. Read queer black men. Read queer black women, trans women